All right, good morning. Oh, by the way, there are plenty of seats upstairs. I can see them right now. So if you'd like to sit upstairs, they're waving their hands. They want company. So anyone standing, you could go up there and sit if you like. So good morning. It's so novel to be at the Minor Theater in the morning. So good job waking up early and getting your good seat here and being with us. My name is Joellen. How's the sound? Okay, sweet. My name is Joellen. I'm the Executive Director of the Arcata Chamber of Commerce, and myself, my colleague Molly Steele, our Board of Directors, our ambassadors are all happy to host you here for the 3rd Annual State of the City. Also our members, 99% of you are members. We could not host this kind of event or our small spring and fall business forums and our business field trips and myriad of other things if it weren't for your membership. So thank you so much for supporting this organization. Also, Josh Neff, the one and only, the most hospitable, for having us in this venue. It's so much more appealing to come to something like this in a beautiful place. So, oh, there he is, Josh. That's applause is for you. And also want to thank Los Bagels, not just for the food, but our important relationship with Zero Waste Events, which we've been doing for 5 years. Thank you, Los Bagels, for that. Who else? Oh, we have 2 important people here who are going to help keep us civilized and organized, and those are our moderators. We have Kathy Thornhill and Lauren Collins from HSU's Career Education and Service Learning Program, and you'll be seeing them a little later, so let's give them a round of applause for keeping us on time also. And the State of the City, if you don't know, it's a time we pick the topics, the hot topics of the moment, and we get our best speakers on those topics, ta-da, and we talk about the challenges, the potentials, how we can each shape our future here. So we're really looking forward, and most appreciation perhaps to our speakers. We have our city manager, Karen Deemer. She'll be first. We have Per Jacobson, the CEO of Bear Extraction House in the middle. And Dr. Tom Jackson, our new HSU president. So a lot of appreciation. Thank you so much. Finally, I'll tell you about the format. The format is each speaker will have 15 minutes, up to 15 minutes to speak. And in between, we'll try to take a 1 minute break, and you'll write questions on your cards, but only 1 question per card. And if you have 5 questions, use 5 cards. And then just pass them down like communion to the end. And I'll gather them, I'll take them to the moderators. So in between speakers, I'll pick up your cards. And at the very end, our moderators will pitch the questions to the speakers, and we'll have about 20 plus minutes for those. And do your 2nd grade teacher proud, and please write clearly, or you cannot expect the moderator to read and let alone ask your question. And with that, we will get you out by 10 o'clock. And let's welcome Karen Deemer.
What it is being first. That sounds better, everyone. Okay, let's move through. So good morning. As Joellen said, we just have a few minutes each, so about 15 minutes we're going to move through what I view as the state of the city. Each year we talk a little bit about the balance that we try to strike. To me, the state of the city is strong when the city can continue to meet needs that cover sort of the gamut of the priorities here in Arcata. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we balance services, how we balance between housing and economic development. I did want to touch on the work that Equity Arcata has been doing for the last almost 3 years, just because we haven't touched on that in this forum before. And then I know the group likes to see quickly our sales tax trends, and then would like to give some updates on our police department. When we talk about city balance, we often talk about the difference or the balance between hard infrastructure and quality of life services. So this past year, we awarded 8 projects for sort of core infrastructure pieces, a little over $1 million. Last year, you'll probably recall that we issued over $11 million in projects. Many of those were 2-year projects. So if any of you were lucky enough to be in Arcata last summer, you probably felt like there was no sidewalk, street, or alley that wasn't dug up. I think we were in just about every neighborhood doing sewer I&I, doing water repair, and a lot of sidewalk infill. On the flip side, we also had 2 really significant forest acquisitions last year. The first one was if any of you play Frisbee golf out in the forest, most of those Frisbee golf holes were actually on what was the last private inholding within the Arcata Community Forest. So this last year we were able to acquire that 49 acres. It is now owned by you, the community. We also had a significant purchase in the upper watershed of the Jacoby Creek Forest, 967 acres, a little much for Arcata to manage in addition to our holdings. So we turned to our primary partner in the city, Humboldt State University, who actually took 884 of those acres that will be used as a learning classroom. My goal is to not cough. We'll see if I can will it away. This year we passed our new housing element. If any of you are following state housing trends, our particular governor, Gavin Newsom, is not going to give cities a break who are not building housing. So the state passes down numbers in terms of county averages that need to be met for housing, and then the counties create a formula that divides those up between the cities. So in the next 8 years, we are looking at needing to build, to meet our state numbers, 610 total units. They are divided into a very low, moderate, and above moderate income levels. And you'll see that Arcata's has our highest needs in the very low level and in the actual above moderate level to get to that 610. Just to give you a snapshot, these numbers started in 2019. So we do already have, about 70 applications and permits that are in. So it does look like we could be on target to meet some of these goals, but in truth, we don't have zoning to support all of those units, so we will be looking at some changes moving forward. I think the message on housing right now in the state is we as a community need to come together to decide where we're going to build so that the state doesn't come in and decide that for us. We did make some good headway on affordable housing too. We recognize that we have needs that are even above and beyond what's allocated from the state. So we did receive some funds that we will be purchasing some modular units that will go in some vacant parcels in existing mobile home parks that will then be filled by our coordinated entry system through our partnership with Arcata House Partners. And then we worked with Danco for the old Isaacson's car lot in downtown, and they will be building 44 units of affordable housing. With that project will come over $2 million in money to the city, to this community, that will be put towards alternative transportation, potentially even including a new electric bus. So again, just trying to look for how do we balance our services. On the economic development front, you're going to hear a little bit from the expert in the cannabis field here in Arcata. But just to tell you where things are trending, we had 48 renewed cannabis permits. So that's really our total inventory for renewal for 2019, and 14 new. So I think similar to our other regional cities, we're starting to see a leveling off. And we're starting to understand who are the businesses and people that are really committed to rooting and growing cannabis in a real professional way in this community. And this next year's challenge will be figuring out how do we support these industries that are now here to stay. We also supported 15 new events through our partnership with Main Street on the plaza. And these are really focused on smaller events, Sunday fun days, Friday night music, events that were really designed to bring people down to the plaza at times when our businesses were open to drive that economic development. If you haven't checked out workforceweekend.com, Arcata Economic Development Corporation partnered with all of the cities to put together a website connecting job seekers with Humboldt County businesses. So if you haven't checked that out and you're looking for talent, please do. And if you're a small business in Arcata and you need some startup funds or you need a piece of equipment to modernize your inventory or to modernize your production, we do have a new microenterprise loan. So at least reach out to the city to see if there's something that we might be able to do on a small loan basis to help your business. So again, just looking to balance quality of life with economic development. I'm going to play a quick video. It's probably the quickest way for me to show you a little bit about Equity Arcata. And then I'll just update quickly on the working groups associated with Equity Arcata and what each are doing.
Hi, I'm Malcolm Chinayo. I'm the Racial Equity Intern for the City of Arcata. So Equity Arcata is a partnership between HSU, the City of Arcata, and local businesses and nonprofits. The goals of Equity Arcata are to eliminate racial disparities for people of color, starting at HSU and the City of Arcata, in housing, health, education, and employment. My role as the Racial Equity Intern is to be the first point of contact for the City of Arcata and everybody involved in Equity Arcata. When I studied at Humboldt State University, I studied ethnic studies, and I learned a lot about racial injustice and the ways that people organize and work to dispel those issues, and I thought it was a great opportunity to take those things that I learned and apply them to the community that I live in, and that's how I got really passionate about Equity Arcata. Racial injustice has been in the news a lot in the last several years, both on a national and a local level. So Equity Arcata is just situated right in those conversations. We actually kind of predate some of those issues, and it just creates impetus. It just creates catalysts for us to continue to do the work that we're doing. I want our community to know that racial injustice is an issue and that everybody has a part to play in changing that, and that if people want to get involved, I highly encourage them to do so. Equity Arcata creates a great chance for people to work in their communities and address really serious and important issues. I really want to encourage community members to check out our website, equityarcata.com. There's all kinds of information about the work that we're doing, different events that are related to racial equity in our community, and contact information for myself and for other people involved in Equity Arcata. Our people, our community, Arcata.
All right, we'll just move it on. So out of Equity Arcata, we have 7 different working groups. They're all staffed by groups of volunteers, and they are really working on moving the needle in terms of the metrics on racial equity in housing, in health, in education, and in employment. And so I'm just going to give you a couple examples of the types of work that they do. And as Malcolm indicated, if you're interested, just jump on to equityarcata.com and figure out how you can get involved. We have groups that do things as simple as potlucks. They do 4 potlucks a year. We call them Home Away from Home. If you haven't been to one, I highly encourage you to go. I bet most of you have probably been to one potluck before. They have different themes, and it's basically the community coming out and cooking food, coming together, and just networking with students and giving students a chance to meet the community and create context that they need to help them find employment, to help them find housing, to help them find places to get their hair done. I mean, all of the simple things, and just being able to sense that the Arcata community is a place that they could make home. We had a real interest from the students to talk about safety and to talk about relationships with the police departments. So our 2 police chiefs from Arcata and HSU staff a working group on police and student safety and relationships. And last year they created a student escort program that students are funded through the University Police Department to escort students home if they're feeling unsafe. We have a large group doing training and learning. They've trained over 200 people every year since we've been up and running in a host of trainings, from cultural humility to the 4 dimensions of racism to implicit bias and several others. And if you're interested in receiving training as an employer or as a group, please reach out to us as well. We also have a welcoming business group, which I think would be of interest to many of the people in this room. Right now they're putting out newsletters a few times a year that will give businesses really concrete ways that you can work with your employees, training around racial equity, training around making your business feel welcoming to all in our community, and why that is important today. So please reach out. Moving back onto some city basics, we do have a fully staffed building division in Arcata. Finally, it's taken us several years to get to this point, but we are starting to move back into code enforcement. So if you have a house that's in your neighborhood that's been creating significant nuisance, it is a good time to reach out to the city and start to track that. These processes can be slow. If you recognize this house here, it's from the corner of Alliance and Hillficker. Took us many years, but this house was quite a drug haven and area of crime for that neighborhood. Through city enforcement, unfortunately, it took some pretty heavy-handed work, but we were finally able to get that property sold and then renovated and sort of, recreating that sense of safety in that neighborhood. So Do reach out. We've got 4 others that we're working on right now. I will warn you that it is slow, but it can be successful, and it's nice to see that change for that neighborhood. Briefly on sales tax. Ooh, this got flattened out a little bit on this screen. I don't know what it looks like there. So that bottom one shouldn't be quite so low. So last year when we talked, overall we had seen sort of sales tax really trending downward. But when we spoke last year, we also just started to see over that last holiday season in 2018 things starting to level out. Overall, we were down about 2.5% in sales tax. I certainly, on a personal level, understand that some of you were hit harder than that. But overall, you know, we don't have large big box retail. That's been a conscious choice of Arcata. So we also don't see the huge swings in sales tax that sometimes come when economic downturn hits. What we're seeing this year is a recovery of about half of that. We are still going to come in below 2018-19 levels, but we are certainly starting to see a slow recovery. I throw up our top 25 sales tax producers just because I think it's of interest typically to this group. What always strikes me is that we do typically have all of our gas stations listed. It's probably not common in most cities, but we've talked about that we don't really focus on large retail. We focus on niche manufacturing in Arcata, and gas does have sales tax in addition to gas tax, and that does generate quite a bit of revenue for the city. I did want to touch a little bit on our police department this year. If you haven't met our new chief, Chief Brian Ahern, he's been on a little bit over a year. And if you haven't met him, I am afraid this might have been the first time that you've been out of your house in the last year. So I think he has been at most events, and if you haven't met him at an event, one of the initiatives that he started when he got here was community walks. So he's probably knocked on your door if you live here in Arcata. But he has certainly taken some time to get to know the department and to get to know the community, and he's now starting to take some time to build the department to meet the needs that have been addressed and shared with him over that first year. So he has brought together, working with our leadership team in the police department, a new investigative unit. So we are now staffed with both a lieutenant, detective sergeant, 2 full-time detectives, and a 3rd detective that will be moving into rotation. This becomes important even for something like the tragic fire that we had over the weekend. Although the likelihood of a fire, you know, being anything other than accidental is slim, especially when you have something as tragic as a loss from a fire, you need to process that entire scene for potential crime. So that whole unit was called out this weekend, and then certainly to other events that we've had throughout the year. One of the pieces that the investigative team started working on early was actually in our Cannabis Innovation Zone. Some of you probably heard we had a short series of break-ins in that region. That team worked hard, and I think there might still be 1 of 4 people that we felt like were part of that ring that we are still looking for, but we made several arrests. And while we recognize hopefully 1 of them will be away for a while, a couple of them will probably get out pretty quickly. But I think it's sending a very strong message that we will come looking for you and that this is not the area that you want to produce that kind of crime. And we are seeing a decrease in that type of property crime with the efforts that have been made. We've also brought on a new evidence technician, and she actually just started last month. And it'll be nice to have somebody specializing in crime scene evidence collection. Additional training programs and really a focus in the Valley West area. We started a Valley West Business Watch, and then the chief and the team with Arcata House Partnership and some leaders from that community have been doing monthly cleanups. And I would be remiss if I didn't stand up in front of this group and say, please, if you know anyone that would be a great police officer or dispatcher, we are still hiring and always looking for a few good people to add to that team. And if you haven't met our chief, he is here this morning with a lot of his leadership team as well. Please take the time to introduce yourself and share your thoughts about Arcata with him. I'm going to hold questions of the month unless Joellen tells me I have time, but to maybe keep her on time. I know you guys are going to have questions. Maybe I'll just take the first one, because the most common question that I get right now is around the rebuilding of the businesses on the east side of the plaza that were affected by the fire. And they are slowly working to come back online. Eco Groovy got open pretty quickly. We even opened her out in a little stall out front, in a parking stall, because these fires hit right before Halloween, which is a huge sales time period for her. She had already been looking to move to the Arcata Exchange building. So good news on the retail front in Arcata. You know, the story that she shared with me was that when she moved to the plaza, everybody told her, are you going to be ready for that level of sales? And she said, oh yeah, I mean, it's going to be our regulars and our usuals. And she said, Karen, the sales have just skyrocketed. We really had no idea how hard it could be to keep up with the sales of being placed on the plaza. So as a result, she's very excited to move into that entire space where Arcata Exchange was, which I think will be a great stronghold for that corner on the plaza. So she already had a plan to move, but she is up and running in her existing. Solutions is just working on a new electrical connection. In touch with them again last week, and they're hoping to be able to come in for a permit for just their individual repairs and that connection, and hopefully be up and running within a couple of weeks. The Big Blue Cafe, if you haven't seen the pictures, the Mad River Union has shown some really good ones of how that fire started under the building and the support structures that were torched under the building. So their structural engineer is still working through that. But I am assured by the property owner that they are working on plans and designs, and we'll get those into us. So kudos to Arcata Fire for being on scene so quickly. We have seen what fire damage can do in this community with the Marinos fire. We've seen buildings that have been vacant for years and years. We still have a hole, you know, on that side, half a block off the plaza where the NEC used to stand as a result of a fire. So to be able to preserve the base core structures and be able to rebuild means that we will have businesses up and running much more quickly than if they had burned to the ground. So not to mention, you know, the additional losses associated with that. So I know that Arcata Main Street is also reaching out to those businesses to see if there's anything more that we can do as a business community to help. But at this point, I think it really is, once Kevin and Lisa get back open in solutions, is just to go out and really support their efforts to restart. I'm going to hold there, keep us on time, and turn this over. I think you guys get to pass questions down. We're going to answer questions all at the end. I'm really excited to be here with both one of the leaders in our Cannabis Innovation Zone and our new president of Humboldt State, Tom Jackson. Do you want me to bring one up, or how?
Actually, thank you.
Okay.
And then and before Per does take the mic, you can take a minute, 60 seconds, to write a question. If you need more, I did only put 2 per seat, so that might not have been enough, actually, because there's 3 speakers. I can also give you back. But write a question, pass it down. You can set it on the ground here. All right, feel free to keep passing them as people do speak on the microphone. But Per, whenever you're ready, thank you.
Good morning. As usual, Karen is going to be a tough act to follow. So I'm here representing Bear Extraction House. We are a vertically integrated cannabis company. We are located off 299 within the city's border. I'm also representing Axel Properties. Axel is a property development company. Our flagship property is also off 299. It's a 5-acre facility. I want to start by thanking the city and the Chamber of Commerce and generally the community for all the support that they have provided over the last couple of years. It has been incredibly helpful, and we have felt very welcome. I also want to thank the community personally because, as you may know, I am new to the area, and I have found this area to be incredibly welcoming. I'm from the East Coast, so that's not normally how the community works. You know, it's different there. Traffic is different too, I can assure you. It's like I have not had anybody have an adverse reaction to my driving while I was here, but you know, and I drive slow, so. So I want to focus my talk on the cannabis business, and to start, I just want to dwell into the West End Business Park, which has experienced a tremendous growth over the last 2 years. The 5-acre park is now home to 10 businesses, hundreds of employees, and they're all focused on bringing the Emerald Triangle cannabis experience to first to the state of California and eventually to the nation. I think it's fair to say that the park represents what our cannabis is and what it should be, and that is simply a national contender. The cannabis up here, our history is rich, our products are excellent, but sometimes we, out of necessity, have not put sort of like a shiny corporate view on this thing. The center is such a thing. The region's cannabis industry is, of course, in transition, broadly in lockstep with the legalization, the increasing regulations, and the increasing market size. This transition is not without challenges, principally because of the issues surrounding regulation and the taxation, the increased competitive pressure from the rest of the state, and the recent vape crisis, which I assume that everybody has heard about, and the current turbulence in the capital market for cannabis. At its heart, Bear Extraction House is a refinery which is coupled with a distribution company. Every day our company converts local cannabis products into packaged consumer goods, which we then turn around and sell across the state of California. Generally, the idea behind the company is to partner up with local farmers, receive their cannabis plants, turn these plants into high-quality, high-value branded products, and supply these brands and products to the market. Our ultimate goal is to provide a consistent sales outlet for local farmers' products, to significantly reduce the workload and the cost for these farmers, to increase the value of the cannabis plant by 25 to 50%, and most importantly, to provide a shield against dropping cannabis prices as increasing amount of cannabis supply becomes available across the state. Last year, we, with the support of the city and all our partners, participated in economic realization of approximately $20 million. These millions of cannabis dollars benefited the city and the region directly, feeding local farmers, our employees, and our partners. And we hope that in 2020, this number will increase significantly. Now, I say hope because the situation is changing as we speak. Over the last years, the state could broadly be divided into three segments. Northern California was the producer of the cannabis plant. The center of the state was the manufacturing and branding nexus, and the southern part, principally the Los Angeles market, was the consumption center. Effectively, raw cannabis plants or semi-processed cannabis plants would leave our region, travel to the Bay Area, be converted into branded product that would then travel to Los Angeles where they would be sold. Economically, this situation was not ideal, but given our situation, it was probably the best we could do. And certainly it brought a net economic positive impact to the region. Unfortunately, I'm here today to tell you that this situation is changing and that the sand is shifting under our feet, and this change is going to require a pretty rapid response by us as a community. What is happening is that massive cultivation is coming online in Southern and Central California, churning out cannabis plants from centralized, very large farms at volumes that are unprecedented in the state. anyone who has toured Salinas or Santa Barbara knows this. And anybody who has not toured those facilities, I really urge you to go and do that. It's an eye-opener. At the same time, unfortunately, the legal cannabis market, the legal cannabis supply in our region is shrinking, is effectively shrinking, which is caused by an unprecedented amount of the supply being diverted into the traditional market. This diversion of materials starves our region of supply and sets the southern and central parts of the state up to dominate the legal market over the next years. This diversion of our supply is incredibly dangerous and self-defeating. It prevents us from building a reliable and consistent channel for our products, and honestly, it strengthens our southern competitors on a daily basis. Frankly, it amounts to regional suicide. We can see the effect of this already. The capital surge that we experienced here a few years ago has effectively stopped. New substantial company development has effectively ceased. And companies in the region are either planning to leave the area or they are struggling to survive. For our city and our region to thrive in the legal cannabis industry, we must invest in our infrastructure. Resist the temptation to pursue the quick dollar that the traditional market is offering, and act in unison in response to the current and upcoming challenges. Simply put, we must collaborate on growing high-quality cannabis and creating high-value finished consumer products and brands. The products and brands that we produce must be anchored in the regional appellation, and we must sell these as special, high-quality goods across the state. Most urgently, we must stop supporting our southern competitors, and we must accelerate our efforts to produce and sell our own products and brands. Ideally, I would like to see absolutely no bulk cannabis products leaving the Emerald Triangle, and instead all our raw cannabis being turned into finished products in our region, and only these finished products leaving the region and traveling south. In a nutshell, final consumer products should travel south and money should travel north. When the money arrives here, they should be invested into three things: consolidation, innovation, and the development of product and brand sales and marketing facilities. If we act quickly and decisively, we'll be okay. In fact, we will thrive. But we must all pitch in. Farmers must provide the legal industry in our region with the material that it needs and must let go of its dependency on the traditional market. On a side note, it is important to realize that the traditional market is a net negative. I think that's almost heresy, but the traditional market limits available legal supply in our region and creates an unsustainable expectation of what a pound of raw cannabis material is actually worth in the long term, which in the short term distracts our farmers from optimizing their farm, optimizing their cultivation, and growing competitively. Manufacturers, in turn, must accelerate their product innovation and consolidation curve and seize the infighting and competitive pressures. Manufacturers must consolidate in our region. Only by consolidating can they provide a strong front against outside manufacturers. Either we stand together or we fall one by one. Brands must consolidate into families of brands under the appellation shield and must share the economic burden of distribution and sale. Our counties and our cities, including the city of Arcata, must work diligently on easing regulation, controlling taxation, and stimulating growth of the local cannabis industry. The university must collaborate with the cannabis industry and provide a workforce skilled in business, engineering, marketing, sales, and cultivation. In doing so, it must find a way to work around the challenges that the federal ties impose on them. The broader community must support our farms and businesses both directly and indirectly. I urge everybody here to lobby their local representatives for easing of regulation and for increasing of support and, in particular, grants. I also urge everybody here to consider investing in local cannabis companies with high potential. Investing locally has a range of positive effects. It dramatically increases local cannabis companies' loyalty to our region, and it insulates our region from institutional investors whose objectives are not necessarily aligned with the community and whose goals are property, not long-term. Most importantly, it allows the community to participate in an eventual success instead of letting Canadians, Los Angeles folks, Bostonians, Manhattanites reap all the benefits. Trust me, there are many excellent early-stage cannabis companies in our region, and they would all welcome local investment. So what will happen if we don't ask, if we don't act? Well, to my mind, the southern supply will come online and create consistent high-volume products, which over time will improve in quality and be able to compete head-to-head with the quality that we produce here. And unfortunately, at a price point that we simply can't compete with up here. While they improve aggressively and we do nothing, they will capture the critical shelf space and the consumer mindset, making it near impossible for us to offset them. Eventually, if we do not act, I fear that as enforcement tightens and product pricing drops, we will find ourselves going the way of the cities of the peanut farmer, the automobile worker, the small family farm, which is depressed cities with boarded up downtowns, high rates of unemployment, and eventual migration out of the area. So what sort of products should we produce? On the farm side, we should produce a wide variety of high-quality cannabis plant anchored in our heritage and taking advantage of our extensive experience in this field, ideally creating and protecting strains of genetics that are local to and only available in the region. On the manufacturing side, we should focus on producing high-value, innovative products that can be easily consumed by our fellow Americans. Products that have consistent user experience and whose intellectual property can be protected. It can be done, and the people in our community are uniquely positioned to do it. We are tenacious and skilled entrepreneurs with a deep experience in banding together and overcoming challenges. We are easily comparable to Silicon Valley. What we need to do is to get organized and aligned along the lines that I have discussed. That is to say, the immediate prioritization of our own brands and finished consumer product, a gradual but fast turning away from the traditional market, and a collective focus on local investment. And so I want to end my talk today by urging all of us and our city to immediately engage in an open dialogue about the challenges that we are facing and to create working groups aimed at coordinating our forces and creating a comprehensive, consolidated manufacturing, distribution, and sales support network for our farmers, which will act as the tip of the spear for our region's presence in the rest of the state. But keep this in mind. Time is running out. We cannot afford to wait for institutional action. We must act individually and collectively on the grassroots level, and institutional action must catch up as soon as possible. On a closing note, I would welcome anyone to visit the park and talk with as many talented workers who are committed to the idea of creating a lasting Arcata imprint on the state of California, the nation, and the world, and they are all committed to creating sustainable businesses. Thank you. I hope to be able to come back next year and report that we have made substantial progress on resolving these problems.
Thank you, Per. And our moderators do need some questions so that we do have a Q&A time ahead of us. So please do pass your questions. There's some complicated stuff in that presentation, so let's clarify through your questions. Thank you. Thank you, Per. And whenever you're ready, President Jackson, and do keep passing your questions meanwhile.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you for your willingness to support our Chamber of Commerce and to be here this morning. I'm going to take about 15 minutes or so and talk about Humboldt State University, or as I simply refer to it as Humboldt. And so as you see me do that, that's really what I'm trying to do. Think about this. More than 15 years ago, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years ago, many of us in this room and many throughout this state had a child. And when we held that child for the very first time, there were a number of things that we would hope that would occur in their life. First of all, we would count their toes and fingers and all those things like we all do as parents. But we also had these dreams that they would be arguably better than we are, that they would find happiness, that they would find joy. They'd have work so that we would not have to support them. Health care, so we would not have to support them, all those things. Some of us are still trying to get to that point. And then along the way, we'd also hope that in that employment, it may or may not include a college education. And that's part of what we do at Humboldt. Some might think that we're in the education business, but we really are in the dream business, because there are parents and families that have these very high aspirations for what it is that may occur through the education process. So what I'm going to talk about over the next 15 minutes is really some of the 7 different university themes, 6 or so, that I tend to talk about in regularity. I'll share some information about what state universities represent, and then I'll start off with a very short video about dreams.
My dream right now is to work with people in the juvenile justice systems through social work. I think Humboldt's impacted that a lot because the people here are so diverse. I'm learning so much from each and every one of them, and I think Humboldt's a great place to be able to connect with people that maybe you haven't connected with before, and it's definitely shaping me into who I am today. My dream is to be a conservation photographer for this nonprofit called Sea Legacy. And their mission is the restoration and protection of oceans and marine life. And Humboldt State is helping me achieve that because ever since I moved up here, I've become a lot more environmentally conscious.
My dream is I really want to be a math teacher for specifically middle school and high schoolers. And I feel like HSU is preparing me by educating me on social inequalities. I'm really excited to bring those experiences with me to my future classrooms.
My dream is to live for other people and to live in a world where I can love myself just as much as others can. I think Humboldt State has done that in many ways by giving spaces for students of color and people of color. I think more than anything, HSU promotes a place where we can love.
My dream is to ultimately help others and this community has shown me so much love, and I want to bring that love to the rest of the world.
My dream is to travel around the world and partake in other cultures and pick up and give back to the community.
By using all the skills I have gained here at Humboldt State to take them back to my hometown of Los Angeles and use them to give back to my community.
My dream is actually to become a firefighter.
All I know is that I love being outside and working with animals.
What I want to do is be a professor.
To be an environmental politician.
My dream is to influence the world with my art.
To work as an urban forester within California.
To help low-income communities and underrepresented and marginalized communities.
To create green energy that is 100% symbiotic with nature itself.
To learn about animals and work with animals and see how humans can help them.
To mentor the adults and the children within the criminal justice system.
To humanize those whose stories have been stolen from them.
To help my nation to get it more developed.
When I get my major in biology, I can become a teacher.
Work on projects involving water quality.
To own my own physical therapy clinic.
Practice for sustainability.
My dream is to be able to have my own television show, just like the Greek Steve Irwin did himself, and spread a message of environmental awareness. You know, I just got here 1 year ago, and Humboldt's home. I'm very happy that I chose this place to call home.
Thanks to the Humboldt Marketing and Communications Department, better known as MARCOM, for many of you. And those students, if you listen to many of their aspirations, it wasn't as simple or simplistic as it may seem. If you were with me, you could hear the depth of what it was they were trying to do, and the environmental or the passion for changing the world. And that's subtly the difference of the Humboldt student with the rest of the state. And in one respect, that's what makes us very distinctive. Humboldt is very similar, though, to other universities. There are essentially a few types of institutions, one of which are state universities. And if you think about the number of universities or municipalities in this state, we're one of the most fortunate. There are 482 municipalities in California. Only 23 have a state university. And that makes a significant difference within a community, and I'll share that in just a moment. It may be the next slide. We also have to do a lot as a university, because we're a state university, to recognize the role that we play in a community. Quick show of hands, how many of you in this room earned a college degree at a state university? If you wouldn't mind raising your hand. And if you look around for just a moment, that would be about 90% of the people in this room from where I sit, which is fairly significant. The state university has given us an economic opportunity, and I'm a state university graduate as well, an opportunity to succeed in our environment, our local environment, in a way that is very different than other places. Humboldt was founded as a teacher's college, and many state universities were founded in that same capacity. And so what we've evolved to over the 100 years that we've existed is very similar to others. Our economic engine is fairly strong, and this is the strength of a state university. And this is Humboldt State University on the slide behind me. While we may have a budget of somewhere in the neighborhood of $220 million, and we are without question a major business, we generate about $7 for every dollar that we have. You see that on the far right of this slide. There are roughly 6,200 jobs in this region as a result of Humboldt State University. Our alums generate over $207 million within this region and state. That includes almost everyone in this room, and you think about the strength of Arcata, and the North Coast region has an enormous, Humboldt State has an enormous part in a lot of that. Lastly, on this slide, the economic engine contributes roughly $567 million. And so your Humboldt State University is a very big driver for the engine of this region. When I talk about the different themes, there are 5 here, and I'm going to go through them fairly quickly in the remaining 10 minutes. But the longest one that I'll spend some time on is student experiences, but you'll see them. I tend to talk about student experiences, our community relations, expenditures, our faculty, and some of our different academic programs, and some of the places that we have to improve or change as we evolve over the next few years, and that's global, online, and graduate programs. Let me talk a little bit about our student experience. One of the things that we are focused very much on as a university is our retention of students. 85% of our student body comes from someplace other than Humboldt County. Think about what I just said. 85% of our student body comes from someplace other than Humboldt County. 15% of our student body in general comes from San Diego. And so if you think about just where we are pulling students from, it no longer is just Humboldt County, and Humboldt County cannot, just in the raw numbers alone, support Humboldt State. We're one of the few in the CSU, the California State University, that is a destination university. So if you come to this university, we're your first or second choice in most likely scenarios, and you're here for a very specific reason, and you came from someplace else. Our focus over the next few years is really to rejuvenate the local community in such a way that those students, those high school graduates from this particular area, choose Humboldt State University and choose to stay in the local region for all the right reasons. So our focus is basically San Francisco to Sacramento to Reno, all the way north to Alaska. That's not to say that the 30% that come from Los Angeles or the 15% that come from San Diego are not welcomed. What it is to say is that one of our strengths is that local region, and we need every local student looking at higher education. I also talk about it, I'm talking still about retention. We ask for 4 words that drive the university right now. I'm going to ask you to remember these 4 words: a positive, meaningful, educational experience. I'll say them again: positive, meaningful, educational experience. Our university is squarely focused on that right now, and it sounds like it's all about the student, but it is about the entire region and what we do to help drive the university. If we pull a student in to this university, we want them to have a positive, meaningful educational experience, because that also drives the businesses that you are all a part of in this community. If they stay, that contributes to this economic engine that I just shared with you a moment ago, and that's important for the region. So we want that to occur, and it doesn't just mean that the students have to have fun on campus. It means the experience, the businesses, the faculty, all are contributing factors to the joy or the support systems of one another. I'll skip local enrollment and come back to that in just a moment on another slide. We've already talked a little bit about the importance of housing. Our city is focused squarely on that right now, as are some of the other communities around us. One of the challenges we have within the university is also in food insecurities. And as a campus, we've tried very, deliberately to lower the cost to our students, inclusive of having a $3 meal for them as much as they want to have throughout the day. That's important because while we may have a lower cost of education than other places in the United States, it's still expensive for our specific students. We may not necessarily view it that way, but they come from all backgrounds, and some can easily write the check and some certainly cannot. And so keeping them here and keeping them in school will produce an alum, just like many of us in this room. We also are focused on how we can engage the community, and I'll share a little more on that one. We're looking at what we can do with our honors program, and I've already talked about veterans in different venues, but that's a market and an important type of student that is very strong for this university. Last on this slide is transfer students, and you see 50-50 on that. About 4 or 5 years ago, our student body, first-year student body, 2/3 of those coming through the door were freshmen. 1/3 were transfers. So 2/3 were freshmen, 1/3 were transfers. Today, just this fall, 50-50. So 50% of our student body coming through the door were 18, 19-year-olds, freshmen, and another 50% were transfer students coming from all over the state, all of the different community colleges up and down the state, not just the College of Redwoods, but all throughout the state. And that's a very important dynamic for us as a university, and it's actually really good for Humboldt State. If you think about the difference between a high school graduate coming into a university and a transfer student coming into the university, it's very profound. An 18-year-old versus a 22-year-old or 20-year-old changes the culture of a university, changes the focus of a community. I'm going to ask you a simple question. Don't share this with your neighbor. What were you like when you were 18? And then what were you like when you were 22? Hopefully just a little different and a little better. And that is very true with our student body as well. And if we have a campus dynamic centered around a 20, 22-year-old, you can see how it subtly changes the university and changes how we teach within the university. It also means, though, that those upper class students have different needs. They're not as dependent upon a university as an 18-year-old may be. Their issues with housing are very, very different. They're the type of student that can actually be very good in the type of off-campus housing that we have, that many of you in this room have in your homes or garages or basements or things of that sort. So that's a very strong factor for us, one that we are trying hard to capitalize on through our marketing throughout within all of the community colleges. Not to say that we are not going after freshmen. What it means is this gift horse is one that we're going to take and we're going to run with for all the right reasons. We've also looked at touching every high school within the North Coast region. Digital targeting is one of the ways that we are doing that. Many of you do that within your own businesses, and that's made a very strong difference within our outreach. One of the strongest things we've done is coming up in the next slide, which I'll jump to right now, scholarships. You've heard us say it a number of times, Humboldt first. And with Humboldt, what we are trying to do is offer $1,000 scholarships per year to as many students that are eligible to come to HSU. So far, we've offered 430 scholarships to several different high schools throughout the region. We'll continue to do that. This started with a generous gift from our foundation for $250,000. You'll hear us talk about the need for more scholarships and more donors, and I'm not asking everyone in this room to leave money on the way out the door, but it does make a difference because very recently at a very strong dinner we raised $160,000 that will go directly toward scholarships. Those scholarships keep students in school, and like many of you have heard, it may be as little as $500 to $1,000 that will cause a student to leave the university. That may not sound like a lot of dollars to some of us with businesses in the room, but it's a significant amount of dollars to some of those families who cannot cover that cost. So far this year, we've raised over $800,000 directly toward scholarships. That's a big difference. I'm going to wrap up fairly quickly here and talk about our image as a university and our desire to be more connected to the university. There was a banker a number of years ago who said that when he started his branch as a branch president, it was a small branch. And one of the ways he deliberately sought out to increase that business, his bank, was to be everywhere, to be at all the parades, all the community fairs, all the events with a booth or a table. And he didn't ask people to sign up to his bank. What he did was he was just being present at these events. And he'd sponsor something for $500 or $200. And over the next 15 years, his small bank became the largest in this particular community just through his effort. And Humboldt is trying to do that right now, and many of you have seen the deliberate nature of many of us to be at different places so that we can reintroduce you to your local university. That goes along with our very strategic efforts to collaborate with the College of Redwoods. They provide a very distinctive role in this community, and they can provide degrees and training that Humboldt State cannot. But when you put the two of us together, we literally complete the full circle. And that's important to us. The third item on this slide, and I'm planting the seed with everyone in this room, is employee benefits. One of the things we're talking about in the coming months is for the local businesses and the major industries to look at the benefits that they offer their employees. Humboldt, of course, provides employees tuition dollars or fee waivers to attend the university. And for each business in the community, we offer the health care and the 401ks and things like that. But we also want you to consider offering a benefit of upwards of 6 credit hours for your employees to take credits at either the College of the Redwoods or at Humboldt State University and help educate the workforce in such a way to get them to the point that many of you are in this room. Expenditures to funding, this is one of those that sting us the most. Over the last few years, we've dropped almost 2,000 students. And you'll see in a couple of slides how that really has impacted the university. We've heard in our ears that the CSU is strong, the California State University is strong, and the truth is, many places it is, but Humboldt has to be one of those communities that recruit. We're one of the few universities that literally can't just stay here and stay open with people coming through the door just because we are here. We're just too remote and non-urban. And so we are deliberately trying to get out there and recruit individuals to come to this university. But because of that, our numbers have gone down. And we might say that's because of the university, but it has more to do with the region, a lot more. 18 years ago, there was a trend, and those trends were that fewer people had children. And we're a benefactor of that trend, and it will continue for a few more years. And so absent the urbanness of this community, we already know that there are just not as many 18-year-olds coming through the door because that data is freely available out there from births 18, 19, and 16 years ago. So our budget, $224 million. We are reducing over the next couple of years about $5 million. That's fairly significant. And you can see the numbers of how our university is structured. The operating funds tend to be state dollars married with tuition dollars. So what a student pays along with what the state gives. That's how we're structured. Self-support are those enterprises like healthcare and things like that that have to pay for themselves. And the auxiliaries are those that we try to make some resources off of. This is a revealing trend. And forget the numbers on it per se. The trend shows you that over the early years we grew, and over the latter years we have not. The significant key in this is that we're funded at about 7,600 FTEs, full-time equivalent students. $7,600. We're funded at 7,600 full-time equivalent students, and we're sitting just above 6,000 right now. Another way to look at this is how many of you in here are subsidizing your children? Some money. Many of us. In essence, the state is subsidizing Humboldt State University a little better than 1,600 students. So we're getting paid for 1,600 more students than we really have. That won't go away anytime soon, but we have to take deliberate approaches to grow because we are basically removing money from other universities in support of ours. Another way to look at this, and you can see the numbers, how they're declining, but that's not to say that we are not restructuring our university and looking at other programs that we can do to help rejuvenate and build up the interest in the university. Lastly, the last element down there is base versus opportunity. And I know I've gone a little long. These are the strongest programs, the biggest programs that we have within the university. It doesn't mean they're the best. It just means that these are the ones that more students are taking. Take a quick look because I'm going to the next slide. Psychology's up there, but that's not because we have psychology majors. It's just one of those very interesting courses and programs that students have. This slide shows you what is happening, the opportunity that is out there. And film is one of those that went up by 24 students. That's not to say that we're going to become a university that only does film. If you look beyond this slide, the real question is what should we be offering that we are not? And that's how we as an institution have to evolve. So you can see that these are the things that we are and the strength that we are. But what is not here is what really we have to become. And if you can think of a degree or think of a different idea, that's what we are doing as a university. Lastly, we will look at global online education. You might say that, why would you do online education? Because we kind of have to. The region is so big, and it's kind of become the normal for any university. It's not that we also want to add international students from throughout, it's that we want to internationalize our university. Our students have to graduate with global competencies in such a way that they can compete on a global scale. And while we have outstanding academic programs, they may be concentrated in California and the industries of California when in fact we are competing globally. So I'll stop there and say that we're one of the few universities in the state that has a one-word name. If we're out there and say, where are you from or what university you went to, we don't have to say Cal State blankety blank. We just say Humboldt. And we're very proud of that. And so we ask you to do the same. So thank you for your time. Sorry for the length of my short presentation. And if you have any questions, ask Karen.
All right, thank you all for what you shared. A reminder, I'm Lauren Collins, and this is Kathy Thornhill. We're from the Academic and Career Advising Center and the Center for Community-Based Learning at Humboldt State. We have a slew of questions that we're trying to compile as much as possible into categories and see how many we can get through in the next 25 minutes. So it's not quite lightning round answers yet, but as concise as possible, just so we can get through as many as possible. Thank you.
So Karen, we're going to start with the first question is for you. This actually came from your slide. Somebody wanted to hear the answer about what we are doing to update. Can you update us on what is being done to reduce and recycle and eliminate the plastics?
Yeah, the City Council actually next Wednesday night, tomorrow night, we're Tuesday. Yeah, we're Tuesday. We'll be finalizing an ordinance on restricting takeout containers and single-use plastic bottles in the city. So if you are a retailer or a restaurant, I'm guessing that you have heard of it because we've reached out to 100% of them, but you should tune in. The council had a series of choices to make. They really went as bold as they could, given sort of the current state legislation around plastics. But we will be eliminating all single-use plastics on city-owned facilities, and we'll be restricting all takeout containers to be fiber-based compostable. So that's kind of in a nutshell. That will go into effect 30 days after tomorrow night, and so we will start to outreach to all of you to help you in implementing those in your restaurants and stores.
Thank you. This next question is for Per. What suggestions, well actually this is, I'm combining two here for the sake of time. Is it a real fear that our local cannabis farmers could become growers for other regions or out-of-state manufacturers? And what suggestions do you have for our farmers that can't afford the permitting process to become local suppliers in the new market?
I'm not sure I got the first piece of the question.
Okay. Maybe I shouldn't have combined them. We'll just ask the first one. Is it real fear that our local cannabis farmers could become growers for out-of-state or out-of-country corporations? And then I'll do the follow-up question after.
As it looks right now, no. I mean, the real fear is that our farmers will become obsolete. I think that the footprint that we have here with 5,000 and 10,000 and 20,000 square foot farms effectively will not be able to compete. So it's not a question of whether our material will in the long run be diverted to somewhere else. It's a question of whether the farm sizes that we have here are sustainable in the long run. So it's a complicated question, and the answer, unfortunately, is complicated.
Follow up to that, so we'll just, another quick one for you, is what suggestions do you have for farmers that don't think that they could afford the permitting process?
lobby their local representatives to get the permitting process changed. Fundamentally, although the city is incredibly effective in doing this job, and the county is really stepping up, and the truth is that it's a multi-year process, and the only way that can change is by putting pressure on the governing bodies. There is no other response.
Karen, back to you. This is actually a two-part question that starts with you, and then we're going to go to Dr. Jackson for the second part of it. So Karen, how much of the city's financial projections depended upon HSU enrollment, and how do we assume the enrollment will trend?
Okay, starting with the second piece of that, I mean, I think the assumptions that we've talked about with Humboldt State is that we've got a couple more years to ride out. The incoming freshman class needs to continue to move through, and that's where we saw a lot of the downturn in what is now, junior and senior level in a 4 to 5 year program at Humboldt. So we expect to tighten our belts for a couple more years. I would have quite honestly expected to see a little larger downturn in sales tax than we've had. I do know anecdotally that there are a few more places to rent in Arcata, but for the most part, we are still seeing our housing market fairly tight. So in truth, I think the level of reduction that we've seen at Humboldt is probably hurting some of the outlying areas where students go second, a little bit farther away from Arcata. One of the trends that I've seen in the student population at Humboldt is that they really, if they had their choice, would like to be closer to campus. They're used to an urban environment, and they would like to stay in Arcata if they could. So I think that we've drawn some of that economics from McKinleyville, from Eureka, from Manila and Blue Lake, but so far at the levels of reduction that we've seen, we're not seeing it as hard in Arcata as other communities.
Thank you. And question, there is the ears, I think is how you described it earlier. The question is, I've heard 40 to 50% of enrolled freshmen didn't return for the spring 2020 semester. What is the honest outlook on HSU's enrollment crisis?
We will continue to decline, as Karen said and others have said, for at least another 2 years, flattening out. A big piece of that also is when we have a big class, as we did in the early 2015-2016 period, they actually have to work through the university. And so that also means then we have larger graduating classes. And when we don't replace outgoing students with as many incoming students, it creates a natural decline within the university. Where we think that we can backfill and strengthen, that is in our transfer students, as we said. Those transfer students are coming and choosing Humboldt deliberately, and by focusing on them, we are able to arguably meet some of the same trends and needs as we would have if we were just solely focused on freshmen. What I mean by that is, if you have 1,000 people coming through the door, how we get those 1,000 could be freshmen or transfers. And so we're focused on transfers and the local community to help provide a balanced approach so that we can get through these next 2 years and then have a baseline that we'll be able to grow upon.
And how are you addressing the myths that are going out there, or the rumors about the enrollment? So like the 40 to 50% of enrolled freshmen not returning for spring is a myth. So how do we address those in the community?
I just say it's hogwash.
Oh, well, there you have it. Okay.
I'll give you one tangible number. Just from fall semester alone, 95% of our students re-enrolled for spring semester. Our retention rate from freshman to sophomore is a little better than 75%. Would we like it at 100? Absolutely, we would. But it's important that we do everything we can to keep students in the community and help them pay for the university. And that's the big piece that impacts retention. It's their ability to pay, not necessarily their grades.
Thank you.
All right. Perry, I have another one for you, which was just asking if you could explain or unpack a little more about what you meant when you said our area is committing regional suicide.
Yeah, it's complicated, and I guess it's controversial. But I think today we can openly talk about the fact that this region has been largely helped by a cannabis revenue stream. And that revenue stream really is based on a piece of agriculture that is grown. And in our region, it is grown in a particular way by virtue of, law enforcement that is not optimum. Almost any agricultural product in the United States is grown in large swaths of land on large acreages. This community does not have, for the most part, those parcels available. So that's going to be an economic challenge. Now, what we have to do is we have to structure ourselves in a different way than the rest of the state can do by virtue of having them having a physical advantage, a geographical advantage. And in doing so, we have to start thinking of the other parts of the state as our competitors. And we have to think about the product that we're producing today as being the actual fuel that they use to fuel their growth. And there is a point of no return. There's a tipping point where we have supplied them with so much material and helped them build such a large business that we cannot ourselves catch up. So the regional suicide is for the region to allow its oil, for lack of a better word, its natural resource to leave here to help other people stimulate and create businesses while not doing so ourselves.
Thank you. Appreciate that. This next question probably goes for Karen specifically, but then Dr. Jackson, you may have some to add. So what is it where I'm standing? It's my dynamic personality? Okay. What is being done to promote vocational training in the area? There's a serious lack of tradespeople in our community.
I think Dr. Jackson will have a few things to add to this because I know the partnership between College of the Redwoods and Humboldt State is something that he's really been focused on. And in particular, maybe touch on the bringing back of the BSN nursing program to Humboldt. We, from the city's perspective, have been working with the economic development community in terms of identifying areas that CR can help support. So in particular, looking at like water and wastewater fields in this region, and are now starting to look at the construction trades. So the governor's put out some really hefty figures in terms of the housing that we need, and there's some recent studies out that show, we're basically 300 skilled laborers too few in the state of California to actually meet those housing needs even within a decade. So I think that will be the focus area that we need to focus on in the future. What we have focused on in the last few years has really been around the core sectors that we don't want to lose, such as ensuring that CR keeps the police academy and ensuring that we keep some of those water and wastewater courses available in the region. But maybe just touch on the BSN, because that's a huge one.
We're very fortunate to work with the College of Redwoods with their nursing program that has been around for a number of years. We are collaborating with them in such a way that those associate nurses, once they complete their 2 years of training, can continue on and complete their baccalaureate degree through Humboldt State. That's important because that changes the grant structure for the local hospitals and obviously may provide a little more resources to those nurses. That also opens the door for us to, at one point in time, have a standalone BSN program and then splinter off into other healthcare fields that may help rejuvenate some of the needs within the healthcare industry. We talk about the College of the Redwoods and Humboldt State, but we're also extremely close to St. Joe's and Mad River and are trying to address those needs very deliberately over the coming years.
Dr. Jackson, this question is for you, and I'm going to combine two of them. Does HSU have plans for a program to train students or workers for the cannabis industry, similar to setting up a vintner type of program and/or farming, manufacturing, or branding?
Yes, thanks. That's one of the things that I almost overlooked on our I guess I did overlook on our presentation. We've been discussing an interdisciplinary program, primarily through agriculture, that would be directly connected to the cannabis industry. It's not just cannabis per se. It is soils, biology, marketing, business, entrepreneurship, and the social side of cannabis. So we're in those discussions as a university, and what will come out of that hopefully will be something faster than a 10-year idea, which can easily drag on in a university. But we're looking at cannabis very deliberately and have those conversations, and hopefully as early as 2 years from now, we might have a very deliberate program that links directly to the cannabis areas within the community.
Thank you. On the theme of cannabis, how will pair this probably mostly for you, but Karen, you may have something to speak into this from city side. How will cannabis capitalism help protect and preserve our natural resources and environment while the traditional, or in quotes, illegal process still persists?
At the end of the day, everything is a question of economy, of dollars. You know, our ability to protect the environment that we have here, which is unique. I mean, the area of the Humboldt County, the city of Arcata, and our surrounding cities is living in a unique bubble that, quite frankly, to maintain and defend that against the environment around us is an economic proposition. The idea is to essentially make cannabis into a growth driver for the region, and that growth driver will allow us to reinvest in simply keeping the lifestyle that we're used to here. The reality is that there has been a huge economic engine here that hasn't existed in reality. If you like me, if you land in Humboldt, you will be absolutely stunned by how different Humboldt is from the rest of California and from the rest of the United States. The idea of conservation, green, and so forth, it's truly embedded into this community. And part of the reasons why you don't see it across America is because it's an expensive proposition. To go green is simply a question of investing resources. Right? So you have to have the will, but you also have to have economic strength. It is, frankly speaking, cheaper to eat junk, to build with crappy materials, and to use products like plastic. It's just the way that the world works, right? So at the end of the day, the answer is that the cannabis will provide, and has provided in the past, an economic opportunity that allows us to live the lifestyle that we choose to live.
Thank you. That transitions nicely to my next question for Karen. What are the short and long-term plans for expanding sustainable transportation, making the shift out of single occupancy driving? And is HSU a part of that as well?
Sure. So we look at a few ways. We look at, are we moving to pedestrians, bicycles, shared cars, or in transit? So, we had a council member once who said, it's really challenging to have mass transit when you don't have mass. And that still exists in Arcata on some level. But we have to figure out how on a smaller scale we really can make transit work. So we talked a little bit about the city going for a grant with this affordable housing development that would bring an electric bus. It would also bring money for a small downtown route that we could try to start as more of a shuttle service, to see if that would allow people to park a farther distance or stay at home, walk to a shorter stop. Our plans are to start a sort of a comprehensive review of our bus system that we're going to be doing between now and the end of this year, looking at a few things. Looking at Humboldt State, we're talking about potentially they have interest in park and ride. They're very impacted if you've ever tried to park at Humboldt State after 7 a.m. So how do we create some park and ride shuttles? And how do we get Arcata's bus system on the half-hour route? Right now our transit really is on the hour route. It is really 90% designed around the Humboldt State student. It is funded 90% by the Humboldt State student. But it is not as geared towards our working community as well. So we want to take a look at that and really determine whether we can afford it right now or not. What is the true cost of being able to expand transit, to be on the half hour, to be able to hit our employment centers, and as one piece of it. The other piece that we've made huge investment in, and we will continue to, is in our off-road trail system. So we've got our in-through town kind of backbone trail that we constructed. It's taking us down as far as Bray Cut. The county is still really actively working to connect that final 4 miles between Eureka and Arcata. Arcata's next piece of that is moving out to the east. So right now we're working on what we call the Annie and Mary section of that would take from the skate park now and all the way out to the city limit line on the east side out West End Road to try to draw in specifically our employment zone out there, the Cannabis Innovation Zone. I mean, I never would have sat here 4 years ago, and if you had asked me, what are your biggest concerns about the Cannabis Innovation Zone, we would have talked about odors, we would have talked about theft, but by far the #1 issue we have in the Innovation Zone is too little parking, right? So, I mean, that is vast industrial space out there, huge, huge parcels. And yet, the employment center that has been sprung up by the Innovation Zone is so tremendous that we are now looking at what transit, what shuttle service, what other services can we provide, trail services, to be able to get their employees out there. So it's going to have to be a combination of each.
Thank you. We have about 2.5 minutes left, so we're going to rapid fire questions. Since you were just talking about buses, I'm going to synthesize somebody's question and ask, are we looking for safe, warm, dry places for people to be able to stay in while they're waiting for buses between going in and out of the region?
Yes.
Excellent. What is being done to support families in regards to affordable housing goals?
Building more housing, and we are going to really be challenged by the state and led locally at looking at some regional solutions to sheltering our unsheltered. You'll see it soon.
Lightning round question for Dr. Jackson. How much of HSU's marketing efforts, considering we are in a rural area, are targeting other rural areas so there's an affinity for students coming here?
I'm not sure how to answer that per se. We are targeting all the communities throughout northern California.
What is being done for the other small businesses upstairs affected by the Big Blue Fire, Karen?
There were a couple of residential units and then really just one large consulting firm. They instantly relocated, and my understanding is they do hope to come back and return to that space when they can, but they're operating well right now.
Last question for lightning round is, this is for Per. Is there a specific reason you compared Humboldt's hopeful future to Silicon Valley as opposed to Napa Valley?
That's a difficult one on a lightning round, but you know, at the core, all the people that are engaged here has been engaged in the cannabis industry over the last 10 to 20 years are essentially entrepreneurs. You know, they're individual performers with individual ideas, with a set of, you know, they're self-funded, they're bootstrapped, they have all the attributes.
I think that was very well for a lightning round question. All right. That was all of the questions. So thank you very much for some great questions. Thanks for some great answers.
Thank you. We did it. Yeah, perfect timing. Yes, great honor to have all of you and to hear your words today and to have this great interaction. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. And we'll see you around in the future, maybe at our annual awards dinner on February 22nd. So thank you so much. Yeah. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you, Josh. Minor Theater. Come see a movie.